Good morning, gorgeous. Welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Michelle Daff, and I'm so happy that you're here today for this video where we're going to talk about how to communicate with a man, the best way to communicate with a man. We know that men and women have our differences, and with communication, this can be a real big problem. And if you are married, communication is something that truly does impact your marriage more than anything else. You are constantly in conversation about so many different things. And sometimes we're in conversation without being in conversation. So our bodies and our attitudes are having a conversation with one another. But I want to talk about the best way to communicate, to be able to get understanding, clarity, have mutual honor and respect for one another, and hopefully get you the results that you want. When it comes to marriage, it's communication that actually shatters it. It's either having communication that's inappropriate or lack of communication and not really understanding what your husband needs in that communication. As people, we get very comfortable. We get so used to doing the same thing over and over again that it's hard to make a shift. And I know you've heard it. I know you've heard, oh, communication's important, communication's so important. And I know we know that, but when we're in that moment in the conversation, how do we implement that? How do we actually change what we say or what we don't say if we don't know? You know, some of you ladies have been doing your makeup exactly the same since you were 16, since you first learned. You're doing your eyebrows the same, your mascara, your eyeliner the same, no new techniques, no new information. And that's very normal. We get stuck in our habits and our routines. So it's a beautiful thing to learn new ways of behaving and grow and constantly be in motion and in progression. We don't want your marriage to be stale, stagnant, or die. We want to revive it, and you can revive it just by changing a few things up and just being more open and receptive to learning new ways of being. So I hope that this message blesses you and allows you to be able to see your marriage for what it is. And I hope that the love of God touches you in this conversation and points to your personal issues with hope for healing and for change. So go ahead and sit back, relax, get something to drink, get something to write with, and let's talk about this. Communication is the backbone for any healthy relationship. It's the cornerstone of love, of understanding, and of healing. It's important to be able to express your needs to your husband and to be receptive to hearing what his are. It's important to have openness in your demeanor and in your mind for conflict resolution and reconciliation. There are some key aspects of communication that can truly help to nurture and strengthen your bond. And if you're watching this, it's probably because maybe you find that you struggle with communication. Maybe you get into lots and lots of arguments with your husband and you don't understand why. Maybe your husband tells you that you're a certain way and they can't even talk to you because of how you are when they talk. And you don't really know what they're talking about. You just want to be different so that you can resolve issues. This is a very challenging thing, but I want to talk a little bit first about how you probably should or shouldn't be just before the conversation. Then we'll talk about things to do like during the conversation and mindsets to have. This channel oftentimes focuses on femininity because that is so important in marriage. And some of these things are part of your feminine nature and how you're going to choose to sort of set up the environment, set up the conversation, because every conversation does need to be set. Just like when you're preparing a beautiful meal and you know in advance that you're going to have company, you set the table, you get the dishes all perfect, you get the food placed beautifully, you have the silverware and the beautiful cups and your pitchers of water and lemonade, and everything just looks good before they sit down to eat. They're already looking at it and saying, wow, that looks good. And that's the same thing you're gonna do for your conversation. When you have something to talk about with your husband, set the table, set the scene. And this can just be you coming in with a certain demeanor and with a certain expectation. The first way to sort of set that table is to ask yourself, what do you want from this conversation? Are you just giving him information Or do you want it to be a dialogue, a back and forth? Do you want him to answer you? Do you want him to apologize? Do you want him to tell you something? What are you actually looking for? Because when men are having conversations, in their mind, they're automatically looking for the solution. Like, okay, what does she want? How can I fix this? And even if you're speaking, they are searching for what you actually want. So if you're talking to him and you have no goal in this conversation, you just want to yell or vent or complain, then it's going to go nowhere, because he's going to at some point stop you and say, okay, so what do you want me to do about that? And if you don't have an answer, or if your answer is figure it out or something sarcastic, then this leads to an argument. And the whole point is to stop arguments. Arguments are not conversations. They're just back and forth insults and just meaningless words that are being spewed out of emotion. We don't want that. We want conversations. You also set the table with your tone. You come in with a demeanor where you're going to be calm. By choice. This is not something that you decide once he tells you that you're getting too upset or you're acting crazy. You're deciding before you start speaking that you're going to be calm. And that means that if you're going to have a conversation with him where you are asking him to change something or talking about something that could be a little bit jarring or a little bit spicy, then you are preparing yourself for that conversation. You're getting yourself in a nice, calm mood. That means you're not calling up your girlfriends and your mama and your neighbor and talking to them about the problem before you talk to him. That's going to get you riled up. You don't need to talk to anyone else. Only person you need to talk to, and it's not a person, is God. And that is it. Get yourself in a nice, calm mood so that way you are already set at a certain temperature. Because during the conversation, it's necessary. It is necessary that you keep the temperature low. Like when you're turning on a stove, right? Sometimes you turn on the stove and it just goes on full blast and it's loud and it's big and it's like, okay, this thing is gonna cook fast. You wanna turn it all the way down. Turn the temperature low. Let it be a low, slow cook. And this is going to help him be settled when he sees that you're actually really calm, that you're not coming in here agitated and ready to fight. Another way you set the table is to consider the timing. Whenever you want to talk to your husband about something, it may be on your mind as something that is ultra important and it absolutely has to be discussed. And this is where a lot of times things can go sour because you brought it up at the worst possible time. It's important to not only think about yourself and how much you want to get something off your chest, but to think about how it's going to impact him. This timing could be the time of the day that you say it. Is it right before he's getting ready to run out of the house for work? Is it right before an important meeting? It could be the timing in his life. Like maybe he's going through a really tough time and he's very mentally drained, or he has an injury, or there's something going on within him that this conversation is just not going to be received very well, right? Now, there's some conversations where it's like, okay, we have to talk about it. It doesn't matter what's going on. We have to talk about this, right? And that's okay. But when it's something that can wait, then let it wait. So this is going to require you observing him and observing what's going on in this man's life right now. And if this is something that can wait, or if it's something that we really do need to talk about immediately. And this can only happen if you pray about it and if you truly have that empathetic spirit to be able to see his needs as serious and his circumstances at the moment as serious. Another way that you will want to set your table if you really want to have good results in communication with your man is to keep it short. There is nothing more exhausting than having a conversation with someone who is going on and on and on, especially if you don't like being interrupted. If you cannot even take a breath for him to answer, then at that point you're having a lecture. You need to be in a college classroom with a whiteboard. This is not that kind of a conversation. You want to say just enough, keep it short, and give him a chance to speak. And it doesn't have to be a back and forth. He can speak and you can say, okay, thank you. I want to think about that. You don't have to answer everything right away. There doesn't have to be a comeback for his comeback. and allow him to be able to process and digest the information. When you're talking to a man, he's already in the hot seat. So he's already feeling attacked, feeling like you are sharing something with him that, he made a mistake with. He may be beating himself up. He may be thinking that you're crazy. Whatever it is, he's in the hot seat. And that doesn't really feel good for anyone. But for men, it's especially uncomfortable. So he's going to want to get out of that hot seat as soon as possible. And you can help him by keeping the conversation short. Say what you have to say, saying it in a tone that's non-combative, removing any insults. Okay, when you speak, you're speaking without any insult or sarcasm, and letting him know what you would like out of the conversation. That's it. That's it. And you will have so much success when you have conversations like this. I want to talk about some other things, though, that are important just in conversation and communication in general with your husband. These are things I just want you to keep in mind because this will help your communication to go smoother and hopefully allow your husband to know that you are someone that he can talk to, that you are approachable, that you are open, that he won't be hurt every time you have a conversation. One thing that you can do is choose to have open dialogue. When you're talking to your husband about these issues or concerns, it's important that you are honest. Sometimes in these conversations, we can feel like we're not really sharing everything because it just hurts too much to share it, or we don't want to get super deep into the conversation because it's going to bring up so much other junk that you've been sort of suppressing. But if you're not honest, then you're lacking transparency in your marriage and you're not keeping the conversation authentic and real. And he may be just dancing around an issue that he thinks is solved when really it's deeper for you. So learning how to maybe take time to figure out how you really feel about it before you have a conversation with him, because it is difficult to unpack all of your emotions in the moment. You may end up saying something that you didn't really mean. And with men, a lot of times they latch on to what you say and they believe it. Like you may just be saying something, but they believe it and they want to believe it. They want to solve the issue. So if you're all over the place and you don't really understand how you feel, or you're not really there yet where you've been honest enough with yourself, then hold off on the conversation or tell him, you know what, I want to think about this a little bit more. That's a really good question. Let me get back to you. And when he's talking, it's so important for you to practice active listening. This is where a lot of times when we're in our emotional states, we can end up coming off really rude because you have whatever you want to say and your husband is saying what he wants to say. And instead of actually listening to him, you're hearing him, but you're not showing him that you actually care about what he's saying. And maybe because you don't, maybe because you're upset and you think what he's saying is nonsense and you're over it. But that's not kind. And when you're married, these conversations build upon one another. If you're not able to handle a very basic conversation, in the future, he's not going to show up for the conversation. He's not. So you want to be mature. Be mature enough to listen, even if you don't like it, even if you don't agree with him. Actively listening means that you're looking at him, that you're, okay, nodding. You're not shaking your head like this. When he's saying something, you're not going, you're not doing all this stuff with your neck and doing that like, oh, really? When he's saying something, you're like, oh, no. You're just looking at him and you're taking it in. And you're doing this without judgment or interruption. And I know that this is probably where so many of us get it wrong, is with interrupting. Allow the man to speak. Allow the man to speak. Allow him to speak without interrupting him. That shows kindness in the conversation. That shows that you actually care. Have empathy about whatever he's saying, even if you don't agree or you didn't mean it that way or you think that it's crazy. See it from his point of view because you're not him. So you can't possibly always see things the way he sees it. But trust that what he's saying is how he feels and create a space where you can validate his emotions. It's really nice when you're having a conversation with a man to be able to repeat back what it is that he said. That shows that you were listening to him and that you actually care. So if he says, Natasha, the house seems to really be a mess and it makes it hard for me to focus because I can never find anything. Can you just try to clean up before I get home? Right? Okay. Who wants to hear that? So instead of being like, really? Are you serious? I'm the one that always makes it a mess. What about you? You're always over here throwing things around. You want me to clean up after you? You're going to complain, right? Instead of doing that, which you would probably want to do, you would say, okay. So what you're saying is that when you come home, you would like the house to be clean. That's it. And he's going to say, exactly. Now, if you have an issue with that, or if there's a problem with that, then you can, say it at that point. You can say, okay, well, I will try my best to do that. Thank you for letting me know. You would be surprised how much you saying thank you for letting me know or thank you for sharing that with me makes a huge difference in the hearts of men, because they're expecting a fight. They're expecting you to push back. So when you don't, it's quite shocking and exciting. It's like, oh, okay, we're getting somewhere. And it's not that he's going to be a tyrant over you, but it allows him to know that you at least are on the same team. That's what he wants to know, that you're on the same team, that he can share things with you without you taking it ridiculously personally and without you fighting him. It makes the whole house and marriage run smoother. It's also necessary that you are able to communicate your boundaries with your husband. So many women are in marriages where their husbands are doing things that are annoying or disturbing or disrespectful, and they don't say anything because they think that they can't. They don't feel comfortable expressing their boundaries with their husband. These could be boundaries in the bedroom. It could be boundaries with the things that he says to you. It could be how he acts around your family. It can be anything, but you have the right to express where you begin and where he begins. You're allowed to make that line in the sand and say, no, I am not going to tolerate this. Honey, I don't like when you do this, and I really don't want you to do it anymore. It really bothers me when you talk to me like this. Whatever it is that he is doing, babe, I really don't want you to look through my phone. I don't want you to look through my text messages. It's not a bad thing to express yourself. He may say, why not? And the biggest thing is having an answer to that. Why not? Be honest. And that does take you being vulnerable, but it's important for you to be honest with him. He will appreciate the fact that you're able to share the truth with him about things. And he also knows when he's probably doing things that are a little bit, too much. But if you let him, then he'll take advantage of that, right? It's important to men for women to show that they have boundaries. I know women sometimes think, especially in the dating phase, that they have to just say yes to everything. They have to go along with everything, because the more agreeable you are, the better spouse you are, the better partner you are, the better chance you have in terms of getting married. But it's not true. Men actually appreciate boundaries. They appreciate women who have self-respect. And that self-respect doesn't go away just because you're married. You're still who you are, and you cannot die in that marriage. You have to be able to say, this is really killing me. I cannot stand this anymore. Don't let it even get to that point though. Share your boundaries as soon as you feel they have been violated, and have a conversation with your husband about how you can both have your needs met. And this leads right into talking about check-ins. Many couples have check-ins so that they can have time to communicate with one another. Life gets really busy between your actual marriage, and then you have your personal things going on. You have work, you have your extracurricular activities, you have your health, you have your family, you have your friends, and then you both have your children together. You have your extended family that you maybe take care of together, and you may have a business together. There may be so many things to talk about. And so communication is important, but sometimes it's so fast that life is just moving, that your communication is very short, or it's always about the same thing. Does Erica have her lunch? Like the basic day-to-day things, and you're not getting into the real stuff. So having a check-in is really nice. And I know some couples who do this every week. They have one day a week where they have a family meeting, sometimes with the whole family, sometimes just the two of them. And they go through what we need to talk about. The lights are on too much. We need to start turning these lights off. The bills are just, no, we're wasting money. Or it can be deeper things babe, I realize that you're doing this and I'm having a hard time accepting this. It can be deep, it can be surface, but it has to be communicated. And those regular check-ins, especially when you can predict them, are really nice. Now, I don't want that to ever become like a discipline session where it's only one person who has a ton of concerns, because then of course he's not going to want to show up to that, right? It should just be like a regular, like, hey, you know, I saw this place that looks really nice. We should try it out. Go on a date there, you know, fun stuff too, not just serious things. Communicate about things that are fun as well, because that just lightens the load and it reminds you that you're actually in love. You're actually a couple. You're actually married, and it's not all serious. Another important thing to remember when you really want to effectively communicate with your man is your body language. And I know I talked about this a little bit earlier, but learning how to position yourself in the conversation where you're not giving off bad, negative body language. So you're not closing yourself off in the communication. Remember, most of communication is nonverbal. And I know we hear that all the time, but it's just what it is. It's just we don't think about that, or we're not aware of the way that we're looking or acting. I remember when I was like in meetings at work, I'd be sitting there and someone would be saying something really crazy, and I'm like, but I didn't know I was doing that. And then I would get a text message from someone saying, Michelle, your face has always cracked me up. But I'm like, I did not know I was making a face. And sometimes I actually don't know that I'm making a face, because my face can be so dramatic sometimes that like the slightest change in my face can look very dramatic. So I have to be extra cautious about the way my face looks. And so moving forward, because it was happening like every meeting, he was sending me this message. So I had to start saying, okay, in these meetings, I'm going to try to look as neutral as I can. If someone says something completely crazy, I'm just going to act like it's normal. Okay. Because I don't want to draw attention to myself with my facial reactions at work. So in your home life, it's the same way. If you're coming into a conversation and you're already like this, or you're not looking at him in the eye, you're looking away, or your arms are crossed, or you're giving him that blank look like, hello, where are you? You know, you're not there, or you're just acting like you could care less. It's very irritating. And I know a lot of teenagers do this. So parents, if you're a parent of a teenager, you know how irritating this is. It's that whole attitude that just turns you off, and it makes you want to scream and be more aggressive, because you're fighting their behavior. You're not even fighting what they're saying, just how they're acting is making you want to fight. So this is something we have to be mindful of, is the way that we show up with our body language. Having open body language is best. I always say sitting next to him instead of being over him, like he's sitting down and you're standing over him telling him something, but sitting next to him or walking next to him. Sometimes if you're having these conversations, it's really nice to take a walk or do it at a place where you can be side by side and not across from each other, because that's like a battle stance, you against me. You're not against him. You're on the same team. You love him and you want the marriage to work. So showing him that. You can also touch him while you speak. That's really beautiful if you can do that. If he's open to that, just touch him and say it slowly and smoothly and let it be done after that, right? He'll appreciate that. One of the biggest body language cues is actually your tone of voice. And this one is very difficult to monitor if you're not in control of yourself. But even if you're saying something very softly, if you say it with a certain tone, it gives off the same exact feeling. Like you don't want to be aggressive, even if you're speaking softly. Aggression is with your tone. So saying things in a way where you have truly worked it out with yourself to say that you're going to choose to say this in love. And listen, I know that you probably think this is silly, but I'm just going to say it anyway, because a lot of times we're not open to new things, and that's why we're in the same situation over and over and over. There are other things that you can do to make certain conversations more enjoyable. You can have certain conversations at certain places. Like you can go to a nice restaurant and have a conversation. Or when you're having your me time with your husband, you can say things like right before it, because that is a very vulnerable moment for him and you're already laying down in bed together. It's easier to get things off your chest. and he's willing to listen in those moments because he wants a little something else anyway. So he may be more open to hearing you in those moments. Also, like what you're wearing. If you're gonna have a really important conversation with him, I would recommend trying to look good. Like, how does that hurt you? It actually helps you if you look good. You know, you feel better. And a lot of times men just in general receive women who look beautiful better when they're having negative conversations. This is just sort of these like non-verbal communication things that are happening. He's looking at you, you're gorgeous, and he's trying not to get mad because you're so pretty. Honestly, he probably won't think you're very pretty if you're saying anything that's like insulting him. So that's not really going to work, but I think it does help when you do certain things like wear pink, because pink is a very non-threatening feminine color. Green is also a very calming, grounding, earthy, like, you know, natural color that just puts people at ease. And even in environments that are really pretty, like let's say you're having a conversation about like him never filling up your gas tank. Right. And you just want him to take your car to the gas station every week and just fill it up. So you don't have to do it and deal with the gross gas station. Right. And you do it in your daughter's room that's like full of pink. It is much more difficult for men to get upset when they're in a room full of pink. This is something that's already been studied and proven. Certain colors have very big effects on our emotions. You're not trying to do anything sneaky or sly. You know, you're not trying to do anything that's like, you know. But I'm just saying there are ways to use your resources, your wisdom, and your creativity to make your conversations a little bit more pleasant. And a lot of it is really going to be just you and not the environment, not what you're wearing, but what you're saying, how you're saying it, and how he is used to experiencing you in conversations. And lastly, there are some things that will have to be worked out with a third party. So you may need to talk to a therapist and have someone else be in that conversation to help guide you both to the best solution. Some men really resist going to therapy, and it's something I would say please pray about and ask the Lord to open up his heart for you to be able to see someone that can help and find the right person to help. You can also, invite people who he respects and who he trusts to help. A lot of men don't want people that they know from their personal lives in their marital conversations, and that's totally understandable. But you might have like a pastor or a trusted family friend or his mentor or someone who you both know, respect, love, and is comfortable, hearing about your personal business, and you can share it with that person just to help with some conflict resolution. But that's usually in the beginning stages. I want you to get to the point where you don't need anyone else. You have one another and you're both able to communicate in a way that is respectful and loving. You need to spend time with God, because God is going to be the one to soften your heart. And reading the Word of God, reading the Bible is going to attune you to certain things that God is going to share with you about your husband, about your marriage, about how to behave with him, about how to behave with yourself, taking care of yourself, spending time with yourself, and doing things for yourself. Not putting things on your husband that you could actually do for yourself. Not expecting things of your husband that are actually not his job. And not putting all of your hope, all of your faith, all of your strength into your husband, but putting some of that on God. Because sometimes we make our husband our God and we expect everything to come from him. And he is not your provider. He is your earthly provider, but he's not your sustainer and your heavenly provider. God is. So God will funnel things through your husband or empower your husband to be able to get to give, but God is your provider. So spending time with God and talking to God about your needs and sharing with him the truth about how you feel and what you actually want, coming to God boldly and expecting the things that he has promised you, being in his will with your lifestyle and how you treat your husband, showing your husband the love of God through your actions, being a vessel for God's love to flow through to him, especially when he doesn't deserve it. And I will add lastly that when it comes to communication with your husband, because he is a man and men need time to process things and to figure out how they really feel about it. A lot of times men really struggle with putting their words to their thoughts and their emotions. He may need to leave. and you need to let him. If he says, all right, well, you know what? I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go for a jog. I'm going to go for a drive. Don't say, oh, you're just going to leave? Oh, so you're just going to leave? Don't make it a whole production, a whole scene. Let him leave. Allow him to go, process his thoughts, understand what just happened, what he heard, what's expected of him, and come back. And while he's out, don't send him 1,000 text messages continuing your conversation. Let him have his peace. Let him have his peace. Allow him to process and come home when he's ready. And if you messed up during the conversation, you realize it, then absolutely apologize as soon as you can. As soon as you can. If you realize that you called him something you shouldn't have called him, you said something that was a low blow, you raised your voice when you shouldn't have, you interrupted him when he couldn't even, get a thought out, come back to him and say, "Hun, listen, I apologize. I shouldn't have been cutting you off like that. I really did want to hear what you said, and I won't be doing that anymore." Be humble enough to come back and apologize to him. This will allow him to know that you are someone he can talk to and that you do care about what he has to say and about figuring out whatever needs to be figured out for the marriage to work. Just remember, any beautiful communication requires that both people are willing to openly communicate, to compromise, to have empathy and love for one another, and to always have the Lord Jesus in the center of your marriage to direct you in the way that you should go. I pray that this message is healing and helpful to you in your personal situation, and that God is close to you so that you can reach out to him and ask him for the help that you need. Because your marriage is beautiful, and it's so important to God that you and your husband are able to effectively communicate in love, solve problems, be able to compromise with each other's wishes, and live a harmonious life that will bless not just your family, but the entire world. And I'm here to help. So if you want more of this marriage content, you can listen to my podcast, The Dr. Daf Show. I do have quite a bit of information on marriage because it's very important to me that we heal our homes, our families, and our loves for one another. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.